It's a pretty resilient industry, pubs. When times are good, people go to the pub, and when times are bad, people go to the pub. A lot of the optimism now is about just community pubs and normal pubs. Decent local pubs pretty much stand the test of time, as long as they can offer something that's, you know, a bit unique and attractive and better than staying in.
I'm Malcolm Ireland, Head of Leisure and Licensing at Knapton Solicitors. You're listening to the Brief Conversations podcast, and today we're talking about the leisure sector. I'm joined by David Brentmer, the Marketing Director of Robinson's Brewery. David, would you like to tell me a little bit about your role at the brewery and in the wider sector?
Well, I guess we're a smallish business in the grand scheme of things, about 250 employees. The marketing director there covers quite a lot, so I would pick up marketing of our pubs, marketing of our brands, a lot of procurement, so other people's brands into our pubs, and then sort of some of the strategic direction that we take our pubs in, as well as PR. And for whatever reason, because we're a family-run brewery, so I also pick up the dray horses and the stables, so it's quite a varied role. And I don't know what's going on in some of the departments, but yeah, it's an enjoyable job.
All-encompassing. In terms of the big picture, if you will, leisure sector, hospitality as a whole, is there anything in particular that you're seeing that stands out as the key issue of the day?
We're going to come on to Brexit at some point, so that will become a key issue of the day. Right now, our challenge is about positioning pubs properly to trade in their local environment and be good at something. So a lot of work we're doing at the minute is around segmentation of consumers, segmentation of sites, working out how to appeal to those consumers in a marketplace where technology is moving so fast. I mean, I'm 48 and I have to surround myself by people half my age just to be able to cope with the trends of the consumers that live near our pubs or will live near our pubs in the next 10 years. So it's a challenge, and I'd say the main one is technology really at the minute from a comms point of view.
Is it a challenge and an opportunity, or is it something that your consumer trends are changing more in the direction of people drinking at home in front of their iPads, or is it an opportunity that can be embraced by pubs to try and generate more footfall?
I don't think you can stop the trend of people drinking less. All the stats are pointing towards less and less consumptions. My 16-year-old daughter doesn't drink, will never drink. Runs 4 times a week. You're more likely to go to the gym these days than go to the pub if you're under 24. Now, you can't do anything about that, but what you can do is try and stand out in the marketplace or what's left of the marketplace. So is it an opportunity? Yes. Are you going to, at a company our size, outmarket M&B? Probably not, but you can stand out amongst smaller independents, other family brewers, individual free houses, and that's where we kind of hope to add some value. So our biggest decision we ever make is putting the right person in the right pub. We talk about retention, attraction and retention, getting the right person in the first place and keeping them there. So it is all about providing these levels of support which make you feel like you're getting a bit of a semi-franchise solution by joining a family brewer and all the sort of, the nurturing and parenting that goes with joining a family, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting speaking to clients and other people in the sector at the minute on a like-for-like basis. They're talking about June last year, where we had the optimism surrounding the World Cup. We were in the middle of a heat wave, and the wet-led pubs in particular were flying. Whereas we're being told some of the dry-led sites not so much, because that's not where people want to spend the time when there's beer to be drunk and when there's football to be watched. That's meant that this year, particularly June comparatively, has been quite difficult for the wet-led sites, but the food-led sites have been sort of celebrating, saying that looks far better than it did last year. Is that something you'd echo?
Yeah, if you're talking about the summer of sport and Harry Kane's left foot, right foot, head, it was a big boost last year. It's still the biggest single thing that can affect our business is the sun shining. Now, if that's overlaid by a football tournament, that's brilliant. But actually, just the weather gets us. Where some of our sites are 20% down like for like. We're not necessarily seeing this wet-dry split. It's just general footfall into pubs. If you read some of the trade press, a lot of the optimism now is about just community pubs and normal pubs and a move away from, they call them fast casual dining chains, high street chains that have popped up. But that's the thing about those chains, because they're trend-led, they appeal to that younger demographic that wants something new, and once they've had it, they want something new. So the amount of investment you have to put into some of those high street trend-led chains to attract, 18 to 28-year-olds, you almost can't keep up with that. And those models seem to keep bursting, whereas decent local pubs pretty much stand the test of time as long as they can offer something that's a bit unique and attractive and better than staying in.
We sort of touched on the B word, Brexit, whether that presents an opportunity. I think if you listen to your a couple of years ago, if you listen to your people that were very much pro Brexit, a lot of it was about the massive potential for rising staycations. I think the one thing that we know at the minute is that uncertainty hurts the whole market, and that leads down to the consumer. I think the other thing that we're definitely seeing is that because sterling is weak, the price of food and raw ingredients is going up, which I know is affecting some people. Is there anything else that you're seeing from Brexit being on the horizon, either positive or negative?
It's on our exec agenda every month. So negatively, the biggest negative we see is probably recruitment of staff, particularly chefs. So that is a big threat to us, that there isn't a hospitality gene in the UK like there is in some of our European partners, and that would hurt us significantly. From a supply point of view, we buy an awful lot of wine from, we directly import from France and Italy and what have you, Spain in particular. From a food point of view, there's things that are under threat, but really it's so unknown. We have plans in place, but you might see
many variables.
Yeah, you might stop seeing salad garnish that looks like that, and you might see pea shoots instead. There'll still be something green on your plate, and we'll have to start value engineering certain things. I don't know. It's a pretty resilient industry, pubs. When times are good, people go to the pub, and when times are bad, people go to the pub. So, like I said, the weather's the big killer. So, it really is. It's not something we're overly worried about at this stage. It will be a great challenge. What I think will be more interesting is, do we as a nation kind of get back to that Dunkirk spirit and go all British? If this is I think the tone of the Brexit will set the scene for it. If we go, it's them and us. Will you still buy Danish bacon? Will you buy British bacon if they're the same price? I know what you do. Now, if it's half the price, it makes a difference. So will you still go to Lidl and Aldi? Discuss, because you wouldn't want to part with 40 quid more to buy British, but you might choose to. If the choice is the same, will you still buy German cars, or will all of a sudden Japanese cars and American cars look more attractive if we do good trade deals with people who are now our partners? So I think it'll be fascinating whichever way it ends up.
But almost impossible to predict with the number of variables that could come into play with it.
Well, I think some of the brewers have got a step ahead of this. So, San Miguel's made in Northampton now. I think Heineken are dabbling with Moretti made in Manchester. Because they know one of the biggest threats is getting product into the country. There are other brands that we buy, like Veltins from Germany, where there's no plans to do it in the UK, and that's one where we think, is this truck going to get stuck at a port for weeks? But there are contingencies. There'll always be another brand that you can put in place. It's whether we all frankly dive into out-and-out British brands at that point. And I think a certain part of this population will. I personally would, if it was a contentious nasty Brexit, I'd stop buying European wine. I would. I'd start buying Chilean wine. If we had a trading deal with Chile or South Africa or the USA, all of a sudden I'd be like, that's what I'm doing. So whether or not I'm typical,
there's still wine. That's the important.
It's still Sauvignon Blanc, isn't it? It's not the end of the world. I don't know how others would feel though. On the quid pro quo, will people in those countries stop buying Scotch whisky? And that's a massive export industry for us. So.
Again, something that we just touched on then was the issues around recruitment. And I think if I'm getting one single piece of feedback across the board about where operators are struggling, not just back of house from a chefing point of view, but also front of house, it's with recruitment. I think it's interesting that you say we don't seem to have that gene in our DNA like some of the other European countries do, and I think that's probably right. How do we overcome this? Because it's a big employer, but it seems to be seen by a lot of people almost in a derogatory way, a career in hospitality, and it's almost like we need to reverse that opinion of it before we can start recruiting, and it's seen as more than a stopgap during a gap year or before you go to uni, and more of a prospect for a successful career.
That's the golden question. So it's kind of everyone's worked in a pub, and it's what they did until they got a better job. and we've all done it. And you know, you don't know many uber successful bartenders, and people do compare themselves to others. We don't have a tipping culture, therefore, you know, if you go somewhere like Italy, some of the, you know, the biggest players in town are the guys that work in the right cocktail bars or work in the right restaurant, because they can earn a great salary from it, whereas we're at minimum wage without a tipping culture. So it's hard to see why people would find this an attractive industry to get into when their friends are going on to do other jobs where, you know, your starting salary is 24,000 and there's a career progression beyond that. You just don't get to that sort of salary as a barman. I think minimum wage probably gets you to about 18, 19,000 these days if you work full time. But why is anyone going to pay you significantly more than that?
Yeah.
And so you can't see, you know, aged 45, 50, when you've got a family, how have you progressed beyond that? Unless you want to get into becoming a bar owner or a pub owner.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, that for me, it's also one of the reasons that you meet some of the most passionate people about what they do in this sector. They're not in it for the money, because if they were, they wouldn't necessarily still be in it. They're in it because they love what they do.
Yeah, and they're a bit of an odd breed, licensees, aren't they? You know, they you know, you deal with enough of them, but they often don't look at their business from the outside in. They look a lot at it from the inside out. Yeah. And so, you know, some of them do it because they want to be the, you know, we do run surveys on this stuff, so we know how many are in it for a lifestyle choice, because it's about the location. It's not necessarily about the money, and what you want is the people that are in it really to maximise the potential of the business.
Yes.
You know, from a landlord's point of view, which is what we are, you know, lifestyle isn't great for us. That said, we've all got pubs where, frankly, there isn't an opportunity to make a fortune here. What we can offer you is a steady and reliable income.
Absolutely.
And actually, we need some lifestyle people. It's where the mismatch occurs, and why it's the biggest challenge we always face, is where you get a blinding site and a lifestyle licensee. Because actually, damn it, we put the wrong person into that pub, so we have to do something about that. Which is why we're kind of getting more and more into managed pubs. You know, as a directional thing, because some of the sites we've got at Robinson's, and we've got 260 pubs. You know, we had 385 when I joined 9 years ago, and we had 50 of the best pubs I'd ever seen and 50 of the worst pubs I'd ever seen. You know, we've got rid of our tail end, and what's left is a really good northwest estate of pubs. A load of which, dozens of which, are potentially managed sites. Haven't been historically up until 6 years ago. We started a program into managed sites, and we've started converting them over, because then we can make sure we make the most of that trading opportunity in the site and the profit opportunity, which has a knock on to the reputation of Robinson's and our ability to attract talent, whether they're chefs or otherwise, because, you know, we want to be seen as one of the best sort of family brewers.
We talked a little bit about some of the threats. What do you see as the opportunities? If you could identify one across the board, one single biggest opportunity in the sector over the next couple of years, what is it?
When I speak to people that think about running pubs, I just say pick something you're going to pick a gap in the market that exists. But by that I mean, you know, there's enough of the population that will be interested in what you're trying to do, and then deliver it well. And don't try and overcomplex the offer. So the big opportunity is to be really good at something. And if you're average at a load of things, you won't attract enough people to be sustainable. So, you know, I live near Lytham, and there's a pub opening up near us that's it's been closed for a couple of years. You know, and it wants to open and be famous for gastro food, live sport and live music. And you go, that just doesn't coexist. Those customers don't play nicely with each other. You're going to not attract enough of any of those people, and it's going to stay as a white elephant site. Whereas you go to the other end of Lytham, and there's a guy that's opened a craft cafe. And on the high street, all he does is a handful of craft beers. He probably does 2 gins, 2 wines, but it's really all about beer, and it's packed all the time. And you know exactly what you're going to get when you go in there and who's going to be in there. And in between the two is something called the Taps in Lytham, which is awesome at cask beer. 12 handfuls on the bar. You know you're not going to have anybody eating food. You wouldn't go there to eat. You might go there for a bit of sport. But so it's really picking your market and going at it. That's the big opportunity. And I could take it to any... And if there isn't a big enough market, that's when pubs don't become pubs anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. That's when you go into some of these terrace pubs that couldn't survive a smoking ban, or in a demographic that can't attract food. And all of a sudden, you're only appealing to the people that drink. And as we've just said, alcohol consumption is going down and down and down. And you haven't got a thing anymore. What's your thing? and these pubs are the ones that continue to struggle. So, yeah, I think that's the main opportunity, or the main glimmer, is just being so ruthless about it. And that's why we spent so much time on pub segmentation, because you know, I now can
identify what you are.
Exactly, or what you should be, or what's around you. So we work with a company called CGA. CGA pretty much analyse all the data in our industry, but I can pop in any postcode in the UK now and it'll tell me what that pub should be from a consumer point of view, based on what lives in the radius around it. So the number of people, the affluence of those people, the ethnicity, the age, it'll go, this should be a bang. Now, it doesn't mean do that, it means be aware that those are that's your low-hanging fruit. If everybody else is doing that, by all means, appeal to a different sector of the market, but be aware of it. And so we're spending an awful lot of time now trying to make sure licensees and area managers understand that you should go after these groups of consumers. Oh, and by the way, this group of consumers don't play nicely with this group of consumers. I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you know, back in yesteryear when your dad would go to the pub after work and have a couple of pints, and then there's another group of people which are, you know, effectively mixed couples where just are not being ripped off for a glass of Prosecco and a nice range of lagers is what you're after. Yeah. Now, those two groups don't play nicely. I don't mean that in a bad way. No. I just mean, just think of the pub where that really coexists. One or the other. Yeah, and go after it.
Yeah, and I suppose it kind of ties into what I'm seeing across the board. You get trends across different subsectors, but I think the fundamental of what I see in successful businesses is be good at what you do. Even if you're in a subsector that's in decline, if you're the best there is at what you do, you'll still be successful at it.
Yeah, and where being the best at what you do these days is very opinion-led. By that I mean review site-led. Now, everybody talks about how unfair TripAdvisor is. Within our industry, licensees hate TripAdvisor. Oh, he said this and he said that. I know it's the landlord down the road just slagging me off and all his stuff, blah, blah, blah. And you can appeal and all that sort of thing. The reality is, though, Google Reviews is now twice as big as TripAdvisor. 60-something% and growing. Google Reviews is becoming the go-to place to find out about a business. So being the best in your area is going to increasingly fall down to Google.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a threat.
Yeah, as you say, I think that it does ultimately, it comes back to what's the demand, where's the supply. Be good at be the best at what you do, and you'll do well at it. David, thanks very much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
No, thank you.